For Trump's Japan trip, Abe piles on the flattery. But to what end? Washington knew not every foreign leader gets invited into the White House for a slice of birthday cake. But Shinzo Abe, when Melania Trump's 49th birthday fell during Mr. Abe's visit to Washington last month, the Prime Minister and his wife, Aki Abe, were invited to the cake cutting. Talk of continuing trade disagreements and the threat of North Korean missiles were on the agenda, but so was the first couple's trip to Japan, a 4-day state visit that begins on Saturday. Now that the first significant challenges lie ahead, especially as the United States and Japan begin thorny trade talks and Mr. Trump confronts new provocations from North Korea. So to keep close ties with Mr. Trump, you Mr. Abe's occasional golf buddy and the world leader on the other end of more than 40 discussions or visits since the 2016 election, according to White House officials, the Prime Minister has planned a visit dripping in a level of ceremony that money can't buy. All of Mr. Abe's plans are meant to remind Mr. Trump, the leader of Japan's most important ally, not to forget about his closest friend in Asia. There will be sumo for Mr. Abe. The flattery is the product of close study of a president who sees diplomacy as an entirely personal endeavor. But 2.5 Mr. Abe is pursuing a bilateral trade deal with Mr. Trump and is trying to ward off the long-standing threat by the Trump administration to enact damaging auto tariffs. White House official, on matters of security, Mr. Trump's overtures to Kim Jong-un, North Korea's leader, continue to rattle the Japanese. White House official, Mr. Abe is just trying to entertain President Trump and make his visit a political spectacle, said Jiro Yamaguchi, a professor of political science at Hosei University. But I must say the Prime Minister has continued to heavily court Mr. Trump in hopes of sidestepping the rocky relations that the President is now facing with North Korea and China. But it is not clear, still, with a culture known for its hospitality, putting on a lavish ceremonial show is one of the best cards that Japan has to play. On Sunday, the cornerstone of the trip comes Monday, when the Trumps visit Emperor Naruhito, who ascended to the chrysanthemum throne earlier this month after the abdication of his 85-year-old father, Emperor Akihito. Mr. Trump the Japanese are hailing this new era under Naruhito as Riwa-yu, which the government has translated as beautiful harmony, and Mr. Abe has made it clear that he wants this concept to define his relationship with Mr. Trump. Japan's strategy from the get-go has been to really reach out to Trump personally, Shihoko Goto, a senior associate for Northeast Asia at the Wilson Center, said. It's precisely, Mr. Abe has spent years studying what makes Mr. Trump tick. He convinced his if that's the case, Mr. Trump told reporters in April of his decision to visit, he'll be there. Mr. Abe's efforts, of course, belie more strategic needs. As talks in an island country like ours, we have this small country assumption that people may not care about us, said Kaneko Inoguchi, a member of the upper house of parliament from Mr. Abe's Liberal Democratic Party. So if you care about this week's trip is mostly symbolic, given that Mr. Trump is expected to return to Japan next month for the Group of 20 meeting in Osaka, and Mr. Abe will have several other opportunities to meet with the President at the Group of 7 meeting in France in August, as well as at the United Nations General Assembly in New York in September. Still, other countries have relied on the power of ceremony and a royal family to compliment Mr. Trump. During Mr. Trump's first visit to Japan in 2017, Mr. Abe mixed lavish examples of Japanese culture with the comforts of Mr. Trump's home after the two tucked into well-done cheeseburgers made from American Angus beef. On this week's trip, by hosting Mr. Trump on an official state visit, a rare event staged no more than twice a year in Japan, Mr. Abe is cranking up the status factor. In recent years, at the state banquet, Mr. Trump could be seated next to a former diplomat who previously worked on trade negotiations with the United States and juggled President Bill Clinton and President Boris N. Yeltsin of Russia at one of her first state dinners as Crown Princess. For his part, Mr. Abe was eager to bond with Mr. Trump from the beginning. After the 26th, Mr. Trump has taken note of Mr. Abe's affection. In February, sooner rather than later, Mr. Abe will be looking to showcase the fruits of his investment. This summer, from the perspective of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or the Abe government, it makes sense to please Trump as much as possible with the sumo and the first head of state to meet the emperor, said Yujin Yagakai, a professor of American Studies at the University of Tokyo. But as a citizen, Katie Rogers reported from Washington, and Motoko Rich from Tokyo.
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.